Om Agyan Timirandasha Dhananjana Shlakaya Chakshuramanitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminitanyamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Sunyavari Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We're reading Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 7, and we are on text number 21. I think we finished our 20 last week. Okay, it does have two paragraphs. I'm going to say, well, it's a full page paragraph. I mean, one paragraph per book. Okay. Yo yam yam tanu bhakta shada yat shuritam ichati. Tasya tashash chalak shadam tam eva vida damyaham. I'm in everyone's heart as a supersoul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his face steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. This is from last week we were discussing how those people who have strong material desires, which is they surrender unto the demigods, and they'll follow a particular rule and regulation of the demigods. And we gave a little explanation. The demigods are like the universal managers. We gave the analogy last week, just like there's a person in charge of the water department here in Dallas, somebody's in charge of the electricity, somebody's in charge of the sanitation, etc. And so in the same way, on a universal level, it's not that there's not somebody in charge. And these are known as demigods. They are an individual soul, like all of us here, but they have different forms, just like we see so many forms in the material world. 8,400,000 species according to the Vedas. And of course, one of my close friends who passed away some years ago, scientist, a mathematician from Cornell, PhD in mathematician in Cornell, was working on this idea of the species, and it's hard to distinguish the whether or not that translates exactly. So that number may be a little different from what the scientific data will show. And so they have a different type of body, just like we have tree bodies, we have bird bodies, animal bodies. Those are all different types of dresses. Tatapakashya eka krishnam lokamadam ravai, sheta tata krishna parakashayati bharata. So Krishna tells Arjuna in the 13th chapter, just as the sun alone illuminates this universe, so the soul illuminates this body with consciousness. So in the commentary of Srila Prabhupada, the founder of our society, explains that consciousness is the symptom of the soul. We may not be able to see the soul proper, but we can understand consciousness. We can see symptoms of life. And wherever we see that symptom of life, we can understand there to be a soul. Just like I have a yellow shirt on, and Ananteshwar has a ivory colored shirt on. So I think it's ivory. I'm not yellow and he's not ivory, and I'm not American and he's not Indian. We just look that way. We're actually, it's just a covering. It's like a dress. The body's like a dress. And someone may have a bird body, or someone may have a dog body, or a demigod body. Whatever kind of body you have, you're forced to act according to that body. Like I heard a dog barking, and so you can't expect the dog to ask questions in English. You can only expect the dog to bark, which is normal for a dog. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to bark. And so this body it's just a vehicle. It's like a machine. It's a machine that is there, like and it works just like a machine. And so Krishna, as they're stating here, I'm in everyone's heart is a super soul, and as soon as one desires to worship some demigod, which we were discussing last week, Krishna makes that person's face steady so they can devote himself to a particular deity. And we'll go through the, turn this on. So we have Asmita, usually our first reader. I think it's okay, Asmita.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Yes. God has given independence to everyone. Therefore, if a person desires to have material enjoyment and wants very sincerely to have such facilities from the material demigods, the Supreme Lord, as Supersoul in everyone's heart, understands and gives facilities to such persons. As the Supreme Father of all living entities, he does not interfere with their independence, but gives all facilities so that they can fulfill their material desires. Some may ask why the all-powerful God gives facilities to the living entities for enjoying this material world and so lets them fall into the trap of the illusory energy. The answer is that if the Supreme Lord as Supersoul does not give such facilities, then there is no meaning to independence. Therefore, he gives everyone full independence, whatever one likes, but his ultimate instruction we find in the Bhagavad Gita. One should give up all other engagements and fully surrender unto him. That will make man happy.
But this is a common topic for our discussions on this group. The idea of independence. Without independence, there's no meaning to love. If I hold a, we're in Texas, so if I hold a gun up and, Nanteshwar chuckled a little bit because we're in Texas. Everybody here has a gun. I hold the gun up to Nanteshwar's head and say, you love me, I'm the coolest Swami. And of course, he's going to just say whatever he thinks. But if I don't hold it over him with a weapon, he can, or force him, he can say whatever he wants. And so in the same way, that's not true affection. If I'm holding it over him, and can control him with a weapon, then whatever he says to me is just for his own protection. It's not out of the heart. And so when we have independence, with that independence, we can choose to serve the Supreme Lord, or we can choose not to serve the Supreme Lord. And in either case, like it's described here, that the Lord gives full independence and one can do whatever they like. And therefore, we see so many different types of living entities here trying to enjoy in different ways. And that independence is there. And we were describing again a few weeks ago, I think it was this class here, where without the ability to leave the spiritual atmosphere, if we decide that it's not what we want, we can leave. If we couldn't leave, it wouldn't be perfect. And so the perfection of the spiritual kingdom is that if we so desire to try to live separately from the Lord, we have that option. And without that, if we're held captive against our independent will, then it would lose its perfection. So some takeaways, some reflections from this verse and purport from our esteemed guest while I teach somebody how to spell my name, because I have a very, very hard name, Ritedvaja. Anyone have any kind of feedback?
Maharaj,
Yes?
Maharaj, it's still a kind of confusing when in this purport, Prabhupada says that he doesn't interfere with the independence, but gives all the facilities so that they can fulfill their material desires. But again, we see that, people suffer and people sometimes they're happy and more like they're not able to discriminate what is God doing and what is not doing. So how do we understand that it is my independence? It's not God's.
Yeah. Well, we get our independence from the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is known as Surat, which means he's fully independent. And because we're part and parcel of that Supreme Lord, we also have independence. But our level of independence is just like the quantity of salt in one drop of water from the ocean is, whatever, 1 gram. But the total salt in the ocean is millions of tons. So we're qualitatively the same, but quantitatively different. And so because the ocean has salt, the drop of water also has salt. In the same way, because the drop is coming from the ocean. In the same way, we're coming from the Supreme Lord. Mai Vangso, Jiva Loka, Jiva Bhuta Sanat. We're all eternal parts and parcels of Krishna. And because we're coming from Krishna and Krishna has independence, we also have independence. But it's a minute quantity of independence. It's not the same type of independence that Krishna gives, or Krishna has. And the fact that one of the part of your question was, how do we know if it's my independence or Krishna's? That's a good question, and it's just like when we understand the greatness of God, when we understand the greatness of the Supreme Lord, there's a process by which we can understand Him. I've given this analogy here. Oh, Hare Krishna, but I didn't get to say hi to you yet. And so, Hare Krishna. And so we give the example of some superior organization or some superior whatever. I always usually give the example of a university or college. And so that entity, like say the University of UTD, UT Dallas, UT Arlington here, UT Austin, there is a process by which you apply to have admission to that university. University is a greater entity than us, and we can't impose our independent desire to enter that university outside of the admissions department. We cannot go to the cafeteria and say, I want admission to we can't go to the student union. We can't go to a fraternity. Of course, sometimes fraternities kind of sneak in somehow or another. They got some guy on the board of directors or something. But basically, there's a process because the entity itself is greater than the individual. And so in the same way, because Krishna is a Supreme Lord, he's the predominator, we're the predominated. And we can understand, bring it down to like in the simple terms, we can create a little something, but we have to take the ingredients from something that is already there. We can't create anything independent of what's already been created. I listened to a really funny lecture this week by the founder of our society, Srila Prabhupada. And there's a little the spirit soul lives within this body.
Maharaj, there was a disconnection in between.
Okay, is it there now?
Yeah, you were saying about Prabhupada, he mentioned something.
Okay, yeah. I saw that the recording came back on my thing. So Prabhupada was explaining, Prabhupada was giving class in Germany. And he was explaining, first of all, this verse that we're changing bodies from childhood, komadam yovanam jara, from childhood to youth to old age. We change bodies. I have a picture I showed to Asmita and a few others last Saturday of me when I was in my 20s. I don't post those pictures. I just let people see because I don't want anybody to know what I look, I mean, it's not that I don't want anybody to know, but and she couldn't believe it was me. But it was me for like 50 years ago. So the body is changing from childhood to youth to old age, but it remains the same. And so I started laughing, and now I forgot the reason for the analogy. But and so what happens is that something greater than us can set the standard by which we can do. So we can create a little something. So I remember I was talking about the story that Prabhupada was giving class on that verse. And so a little child started making noise. And Prabhupada said, just see, she knows more than everybody here. There was a little child, here's the leader of the Hare Krishna movement. He says that she knows it more than everybody here. And then he chuckles. And then the child made another little noise. So Prabhupada said, something gained and something lost. You earn something, you gain something by having a child. You have some pleasure or whatever you want a child, you have a child. But then because the child is making noise, you have to leave. You can't be the child can't handle being in a philosophical discussion arena. Mother has to take the child out. So he says, you get, but then you have to give. And then he gave the example that if you want to build a skyscraper, and there's a really unique way that Prabhupada said skyscraper. He said skyscraper. And no one knows if he did it on purpose or if it was just his accent or it's just like he would say skyscraper building. And he says, so if you want to build a skyscraper, you have to dig someplace and then pile it someplace else. So this digging and piling, this is modern advancement. This is advancement of modern civilization. Modern civilization is just more digging and more piling, more digging and more piling. But we cannot create anything that's not already here. We cannot create anything on our own. So we can see the nature of God. This is getting into your question. Is it my independence or God's independence? And so if there's something greater than us, right? Something greater than us, he creates a situation by which we can think that we are independent from him and give us full facility. Therefore, and the example I wanted to give is you take a look at the entire creation. What can I create? I can only create something from I can create something from ingredients that already exist. I can't create something that hasn't already existed. And so just see how much greater the Supreme Lord is than my individual capabilities. And so in the same way, when we have a reflection or what would you say, a minute quantity of the independence that the Lord has, it is our independence because Krishna creates us with that independence. Otherwise, again, there's no meaning to love. If somebody forces themselves upon another person, it's criminal. And so the Supreme Lord doesn't force himself on us. He basically invites, but he knows as the end of this purport, it's described that one should give up all the other engagements except fully surrendering unto the Lord, because this actually makes one happy. Probably gives the example of a part of a machine, like they say there's one screw of a machine. The individual screw has maybe a 2-cent value, but being part of that machine, it may have 1,000. The machine may be worth I went to get like a nuclear stress test or something like that. And they put me in this big machine. It was like $200 and some thousand for the machine. And one little screw in there makes that machine have the value of $200,000. And so that's the nature. That's the comparison I want to make here, that our independence is our independence because it's coming from Krishna. But that we can't create anything on our own. So we're there's that, like that, the littleness of our existence is one of the first realizations that we have. That part of the heart, opens up, the humility part of the heart opens up when we realize that we're just one little I don't want to say insignificant because we all think we're very significant, but we're just one little part and parcel of the Supreme Lord that has a very important role to play in our relationship with God. But outside the relationship with God, it's like the screw outside the machine. The value of that screw is very, very little. So maybe I went a little bit bigger than you wanted. But, I kind of got caught in that nice little story about the child knowing more than everybody in the room, and then gaining something and losing something, which is the nature of this world.
Thank you, Maharaj. The screw perfectly fit in my brain.
Anyone else have some reflections or takeaways?
I think
Okay, so we can go to the second part of the paragraph.
Yes, Maharaj.
Which is a very long section. And Vajrabhumi, are you correcting papers or you're usually our second reader?
I'm listening. Yeah. Both the living entity and the demigods are subordinate to the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the living entity cannot worship the demigod by his own desire, nor can the demigod bestow any benediction without the supreme will. As it is said, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Generally, persons who are distressed in the material world go to the demigods, as they are advised in the Vedic literature. A person wanting some particular thing may worship such and such a demigod. For example, a deceased person is recommended to worship the sun god. A person wanting education may worship the goddess of learning, Saraswati. And a person wanting a beautiful wife may worship the goddess Uma, the wife of Lord Shiva. In this way, there are recommendations in the Shastras, Vedic scriptures, for different modes of worship of different demigods. And because a particular living entity wants to enjoy a particular material facility, the Lord inspires him with a strong desire to achieve that benediction from that particular demigod, and so he successfully receives a benediction. The particular mode of the devotional attitude of the living entity toward a particular type of demigod is also arranged by the Supreme Lord. The demigods cannot infuse the living entities with such an affinity, but because he is the Supreme Lord, or the Supersoul who is present in the hearts of all living entities, Krishna gives impetus to men to worship certain demigods. The demigods are actually different parts of the universal body of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, they have no independence. In the Vedic literature, it is stated, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Supersoul. It is also present within the heart of the demigod. Therefore, he arranges through the demigod to fulfill the desire of the living entity. But both the demigod and the living entity are dependent on the supreme will. They are not independent.
So we were just talking that we have independence, but here it's saying we don't have we have no independence. So how are we gonna solve this? What do they call that?
Oxymoron?
No, yeah, the contradiction.
Conundrum?
Dichotomy?
Yeah, dichotomy. So the idea here is that we have no independence separate from what it really saying. We have no independence separate from the Supreme Lord's independence. In other words, we cannot just like I remember 1976, the founder of our society went to Washington, D.C., and it happened to be the 200th anniversary of the founding of America, the 4th of July. Actually, he wanted to go down and watch the fireworks. They took him down by Potomac River, and they watched the fireworks. And he says, you declare your independence, but better to claim your dependence on the Supreme Lord. And so without the Supreme Lord providing, we have no independent ability on our own. Our ability is dependent upon the Supreme Lord. And because the demigods are simply a different dress, they're in the dress of a demigod, they're in charge of the sun. What did we see here? Then the goddess of the sun, the goddess of learning, Saraswati, Uma, the wife of Lord Shiva, all these different demigods and demigoddesses, they are able to give benedictions according to their position. Just like the governor, I say the governor of Texas, he has the what do you call it, the capacity in his office, because like the demigods are literally officers of the material energy. And so just like the governor here can pardon a criminal, he has the ability to pardon a criminal. The president of the United States has they always, when they go out of office, they pardon different criminals. And so because they're endowed with that power. And so, but in the case of the demigods, and even in the government, because the government authorizes the ability of the governors and the presidents to pardon people. Without that authorization being given by the government, they wouldn't have that. And so in the same way, the demigods, they are dependent on the Supreme Lord. And see, the Supreme Lord that doesn't, as it's been described here, he doesn't interfere with our independence. And so if someone is desiring something material, and Krishna knows that you can get that through worship of some demigod, then he'll give you the impetus to worship that demigod. And because he's residing in your heart, Krishna is the Supersoul. He's the Paramatma. He's residing in the heart. It's like two birds in a tree. One bird is the individual soul. He's enjoying the fruits, or maybe not enjoying sometimes, the fruits of his previous actions. And the other bird is a Supersoul who's simply witnessing and sanctioning. Supersoul witnesses and sanctions. And so the Supreme Lord is situated within the heart of the demigods also. And so the Supreme Lord inspires the demigods to give whatever they are allotted to give to that individual soul who's desiring, say, some health. So they worship the sun god, some education, so they worship the goddess of learning, Saraswati. Someone wants a beautiful wife, so they worship the wife of Lord Shiva, Uma. And so it's all connected to Krishna. It's all connected to the Supreme Source. Any reflections or takeaways from this long part of the purport? There's a lot in here. There's a lot of it. There's a lot in here. Going through scanning the different people to see if there's any response.
Maharaj, I want to clarify one point.
Please push on that.
So the second paragraph, there is a line says, therefore the living entity cannot worship the demigod by his own desire. I mean, if it's not his own, by his own desire, if he cannot worship, then that is also not his free will, right? Then that will is being put by the Lord.
I'm just looking for the exact place here. Let's see.
It's in the first line of the second paragraph, the second part of the first line.
First line towards the end. I mean, yeah.
Towards the end, therefore the living entity cannot worship the demigod by his own desire.
Yeah, nor can a demigod. Yeah. So our ability to do anything is coming from the Supreme Lord. Not just to worship the demigods, but practically speaking, our ability to do anything is coming from the Supreme Lord. And this is mentioned as one of the opponents of Krishna, is that he is the ability in man. Man, meaning it's a gender neutral thing. It's just the ability in any living entity. Krishna is the ability. And the demigods, they don't have any ability to bestow any benediction without the will of the Supreme Lord, because they are also dependent on the Supreme Lord. But the thing is that this becomes a very, I don't want to say perplexing, but it becomes a very interesting topic, because we're so much captivated by our false identity in this world as being, say, we're all in this room, in this Zoom, I guess it's called the Zoom room, that we're all in this Zoom room together, we're all humans. And so we tend to think, of course, we tend to think like humans, but the idea is that we identify ourselves through the false ego as being this material body. We identify ourselves, as Americans, as this. We have somebody from Hong Kong here. We have somebody from India here, living in the holy Dham or Vrindavan, and different places. And so the idea is that we identify so much. I was just reading this today, that the false ego, the false identification of ourselves, there's three subtle, and there's five gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. These are the five gross material elements. And then there are three subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and false ego. And this false ego is situated in the mode of passion. And what happens is that the false ego convinces us that we are this material body. And along with the material body means the mind and intelligence. And then what happens is that the mind's purpose then becomes to protect that false ego, rather than, because the mind is actually situated according to another one of our scriptures, Bhagavad, the mind is actually situated in goodness, but it becomes influenced in the material energy, because the material energy is composed of three energies: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So then the mind begins to protect the false ego. And whatever type of body we have, we identify so much with, and we really, really can, it's really hard for me to separate out that I'm not doing something. I'm not the doer in this. Something else is doing it. And it's literally the modes of material nature. That was in the 3rd chapter of the Gita, where Krishna says, Prakriti Kriyamana Niguna Karmani Sarvashaha. At the bewildered spirit's soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks themselves to be the doer of action, which, like, we use this word karma. Karma means to act or to do. It comes from the root word kriyate, which literally means to act or to do. And we use this word karma in the West almost as a reactionary thing. When we get a flat tire or we bump our head, that's my karma or something like that. So prakriti kriyamana niguna karmani sarvasaha, that the bewildered spirit soul, who's under the influence of the three modes of material nature, goodness and passion and ignorance, think themselves to be the doer of activities, which are in actuality just being done by the modes of nature. So everything in the material energy is controlled by the modes of material nature. Everything is composed of the modes of material nature. So this body I have is a combination of these three modes of material nature. And according to that mode of material nature that I have, I may like the color blue, I may like the color yellow, I may like the color green. And I think I am choosing the green car, I'm choosing the blue vest, I'm choosing the pink socks. But what happens is that the modes of material nature, which I'm composed of, direct me to be attached to a particular color, to a particular environment, to a particular person, and all these different things, and yet we think we're independent of them. But we're actually being controlled by the modes of material nature. And therefore in the Gita, in the previous chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna, therefore, O Arjuna, rise above these modes of material nature, be transcendental to all of them. And so the way we become transcendental to the modes of material nature is to understand how they function, which is given to us throughout the Bhagavad Gita. There are many chapters that they'll say food in the mode of goodness is like this, food in the mode of passion is like this, food in the mode of ignorance is like this, the mind in goodness is like this, mind in passion is like this, mind in ignorance is like this. What would you say? I mean, there's this list after list after list after list in the Gita that tells us how the modes of material nature work within this material body. And the goal, and one of the whole themes of the Bhagavad Gita is to encourage us to live our lives in the mode of goodness. To live our lives in the mode of goodness. Because when we live in the mode of goodness, we have a sense of tranquility, a sense of peacefulness. And in that mode, one is able to understand the spiritual topics, the instructions, the higher instructions of the spiritual knowledge which is being given throughout the Vedic literature. If we fall under the control of the mode of passion, but we're just so active and we're so, what would you say? Yeah, we're just so passionate that we really can't absorb the spiritual knowledge. And what to speak of the mode of ignorance, we don't even wake up, to hear the knowledge. And so this mode of goodness and learning to live by the mode of goodness is very, very important. There's one book by Rupa Goswami called The Nectar of Instruction. And in the introduction, it stated that this book is there to help us raise ourselves to the mode of goodness. Actually all the principles, even like I mentioned before that I was listening to a lecture by the founder, and he was saying that the Christians have their 10 commandments and we have our 4 regulated principles. It's like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, don't commit adultery. I can't remember all of the 10 commandments. But we have our 4 regulated principles: no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, no meat eating. And Prabhupada said they're the same. And I was thinking, well, it doesn't sound the same. But he says, they explained that the purpose is the same. The purpose of these restrictions or these laws is to raise us to the mode of goodness. Is to allow us to come into a platform where we're able to assimilate spiritual understanding, spiritual knowledge. And when we gain that spiritual knowledge, we put it into practical application. And as we apply that spiritual knowledge as we reside on the platform of goodness and apply the spiritual knowledge to our life, then that knowledge goes from Gyan to Vigyan. Gyan means we have the practical knowledge. Vigyan means we're practicing that knowledge. We're putting it into practical, and we're living our lives according to those directions. And as we live our lives according to those directions, the beauty and the intent of the scriptures becomes clearer and more manifest in our consciousness. And as that happens, the uncovering of our eternal nature in relationship to Krishna becomes opened up. It becomes opened up. And now I can't even remember what the question was.
Me neither, Maharaj. Thank you.
The what?
I think I forgot.
Yeah.
I think it was about the free will.
Yeah,
The-
no, it was about this sentence that therefore the living entity cannot worship the demigods on his own desire. The demigods are also, that was your sentence, right? And so the thing is that the living entity is practically completely, it is completely dependent upon the Supreme Lord in our conditioned state and in our liberated state. We're always dependent on the Lord. We can't breathe without air. We can't hear without ether. I've given this example so many times in this group. All the material elements have a different quality. It's like earth. Earth gives us the ability to smell. Fire gives us the ability to see. Water gives us the ability to taste. Air gives us the ability to touch. Ether gives us the ability to hear. So all these different aspects of the material energy are there, and they facilitate our position, our existence in this material world where we can perceive different things. And so it's a really interesting, without this understanding, it's just a sad situation. It's a sad situation to go through life. There is a statement, it says folly to be wise while ignorance is bliss. I'm not quite sure who was the one that coined that. But it's an old saying, 'tis folly to be wise while ignorance is bliss, because once you gain a little bit of wisdom, you can understand that we're in a situation which is, as Prabhupada mentions in the verse, Harpanya Dosha, where Arjuna surrenders unto Krishna and says, please let me be your disciple. I want you to help me understand my situation here. And in the commentary, Prabhupada mentions that there's perplexities at every step. At every step of life, there's some perplexity. We're having to undergo decision making, and there's so many things that can happen at any moment that we have to make split-second decisions. So there's perplexity at every step. So Prabhupada said it behooves one to approach a spiritual teacher to clear up the cloudiness of our material, are inhabiting this material body. And this is actually the manual. I remember all my friends say they have children and they say they don't come with a manual. Kids don't come with a manual. But Krishna gives us a manual in the form of the Vedic literature to help us understand and untangle us from the using one of my friend Ravindra Swarups word, the quagmire. I've used that word in this group before, the quagmire of our material existence. So just like, this has inspired me to read just one little thing, if I may. I know I've gone a little longer on this simple question. But Prabhupada asks a question in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. He says, just what is the Bhagavad Gita? So Prabhupada answers it in a unique way. He says, the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. The purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is to deliver mankind from the nescience of material existence. To deliver, we need to be delivered from what? From the nescience, that ignorance of material existence. Just like that, in the beginning of the class, I did a little invocation prayer, Om again to Marandasha Jananjana Shalaka, which translates, I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master is opening my heart with the torchlight of knowledge. And therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances, my respects to my teacher. And so the nescience of material existence, everyone is in difficulty in so many ways, as was Arjuna, was also in difficulty in having to fight the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So in that difficult situation, Prabhupada says, Arjuna surrendered unto Krishna, and consequently the Bhagavad Gita was spoken. So not only Arjuna, but every one of us is full of anxieties because of this material existence. The spiritual world is known as Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha means place of anxiety. And Vaikuntha means a place without anxiety. So that's the nature of this material world. Because every one of us is full of anxieties because we're out of our natural environment. So Prabhupada continues, our very existence is in the atmosphere of non-existence. We are eternal living entities in a temporary apartment. We don't have a permanent place. However many years from today, R.T. Swami is going to be, in another form somewhere, someplace, somehow, and we can't stop the ticking of time. And so our existence is in an atmosphere of non-existence. There's a nice verse, Nasato vijite bhavo na bhavo vijite sataha. But that which is material is temporary, and that which is spiritual is eternal. So you put the eternal spirit soul in a temporary place, it's not their natural existence. So Prabhupada explains that actually we're not meant to be threatened by non-existence. We're not meant to be threatened by non-existence. Our existence is eternal, but somehow or other we're put into asat. Asat refers to that which does not exist. Sat meaning eternal and asat meaning temporary. And so it's very, very, this book is so informative. It's actually the manual. It's actually, they say when you buy something and you go to put it together and it comes out square instead of round, then you take it all apart and open up the manual and try to figure out how to put it together. Piece A goes with piece B goes to piece C, and we finally learn how to what would you say, build the apparatus or whatever it may be. And so in the same way, the Vedic scriptures gives us that type of knowledge that we can utilize because knowledge we want knowledge because we want to be happy. Veda means knowledge. And why do we want knowledge? Because we want to be happy. And the Vedas are there to make us happy. That's all anybody really wants, is just to be happy. But as we said before, the fish out of the water, no matter what it's given, can never be happy. So the spirit soul in the atmosphere of non-existence doesn't have a chance because it's out of its environment. So I went a little long here. So let's open it up to our esteemed group. Some what do we call it? Reflections, some takeaways. Well, this group's not usually so silent. It's a silent group tonight. That's okay. We can.
It's still not clear. I guess it's still not clear to me. Dependence is everything that we need, Krishna provides, versus free will. Not that type of dependence. Is that what you're saying? It's a different type of. I'm like Pushpanjali Mataji. That kind of stuck with me too. Like, well, do we or do we not have free will? And then when you broke it down, now I'm just like, what type of dependence? Not that type of dependence where on how we think and feel, but on what we need.
Yeah, well, that's one way to see it. It's actually both. It's actually both. We're dependent on the Supreme Lord because Supreme Lord gives us everything, heat, light, everything is there provided by the Supreme Lord. But what happens is that we choose to be in a particular type of existence with our independence. We misuse our independence, and therefore, I don't want to get into hellfire or brimstone, but we act against the will of the Lord. And as we act against the will of the Lord, we're creating a reaction. And what this body is a combination of the reactions to my previous disagreements with the Supreme Lord, or my previous disobedience may be a word. I'm not trying to get on a soapbox here and give a sermon, but basically this body is a reaction to our previous actions which don't coincide with the desire of the Lord. And so all of my independence is limited to that which I have served this. And once we become completely, like say purity of Lord, our heart is completely removed of all material desire, all materials, they say sinful desire or material aspirations, and only aspires to serve the Lord, then our independence is manifested 100% in our relationship of serving with Krishna. But now it's that independence is limited because we're put inside a particular material facility. Just like we here in this room, this Zoom room, have a particular level of independence, which is not available to the plants or to the insects or to the germs or to the whatever other species of life. Each and every species of life has a certain amount of independence. And it begins with anamana, your only consciousness is eat. That's it. That's the first one. Like there's a whole list, and it goes up to anandamaya, where one understands their pleasure-seeking living entities, and we're actually meant to serve the Supreme Lord. And so our independence, our what would you say, our level of independence is our doing. And it's Krishna giving us that according to our desire to utilize our independence rightly or wrongly. You know, I've given this example several times, Brajabhumi and others here, like when I was a school teacher, when I was teaching school, and I would tell the boys, hey, oh, you want to go to school on Saturday? And they said, Mars, who said that? I said, you did. They said, we didn't say that. I said, no, you didn't say it verbally, but you're acting in such a way you want to come to school on Saturday to learn how to sit quietly so that during the class time you can actually absorb knowledge. And so in the same way, we may not want a body of a caterpillar, well, at least it becomes a butterfly. We may not want a body of a lizard or a body of a monkey. Sorry, Bhajalila, I know they're in trouble over them. She's living in Vrindavan and the monkeys are taking over. And so the idea is it's not like we have a catalog of the 8,400,000 different species of life and we just go through it at the time of death. Yeah, I'd like to be a giraffe. No, it doesn't work like that. We have a certain amount of action, especially in the other forms of life, other than the human form of life and even demigod forms of life, they're pivoting places. Animals, like say a tiger, the tiger is not responsible for killing another animal and eating it. That's just its place of incarceration is to be in a tiger's body. And if it pounces on the gazelle and eats it, there's no karma for that tiger because that's just the type of body he has. But when you have a human form of life, that life has a certain amount of God-given intelligence, which is meant for us to understand or explore the urges of understanding what this world is all about. And if we misuse, it's a pivoting place. So we're held responsible. If I pounce on something and eat it without discrimination or following the laws of the Lord, I'm held responsible for that. And we've given this example many times. If I the other day I accidentally went through a red, what would you call it? Turn right on the red arrow. I didn't fully stop. And the first thing I did was I went like this. And I tried to see, is there a policeman? I mean, it was just like that. I knew I did it. And it was just kind of like a slip of the foot, you know, it was just like, anyway, there's a million excuses, but Your Honor, I'm guilty. And so, but if a dog does that, the dog's not held responsible. The dog doesn't even look to see if the police are looking, because the dog is in a dog's body. It's not responsible, but we are responsible because we're in a human body. So just like we have to, that we're required, I like to say have to, we're required to follow the laws of the land, we're also required to follow the laws given by Scripture. And as we follow those laws, our independence manifests more and more. Our freedom manifests more and more. And our happiness manifests more and more. And it just gives us, an opportunity to expand our consciousness. And without that, we don't have that opportunity. Okay, does that help, Dr. Boy? So more reflections, more takeaways from our nice group here.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for being with us. So I guess our one problem, if you will, is thinking that we're separate. Is that the thinking that we're separate from Krishna, separated from other people? And I think what the teaching is for tonight is, I don't know, like if I see myself separate from things and situations, and then it puts me in a position where that I want to feel special. Well, I have a special problem. No one can resolve this. As long as I think that I'm separate from something, then that's where my false ego thinks that I'm the enjoyer of these material things that we do. And so I guess would you say that that is the cause, the thinking of separation?
Separate, if we think we're separate from Krishna, but
Yes.
our dependence on Krishna, even in, say, an atheistic group of people can make a community and make rules for that community to support each other. That's possible. So, but our dependence on God allows us to understand our relationship with every other living entity in this material world, because every other living entity, Krishna, what is it? He's the seed-giving father of every living entity. And so without that commonality of that common relationship with the Supreme Lord, we will feel separation, because if my mode of nature doesn't match your mode of nature, I won't have anything to do with you. But if I understand you as part and parcel of Krishna, an eternal spirit soul, as am I, with a common spiritual father, then we can have some spiritual relationship. Materially, it'll just go according to the modes of nature. We'll associate or not associate depending on our relation, depending on our modes of material nature. Just like, say, for something that you eat. I was in Houston one time, and I said, I asked a bunch of kids, what's your favorite prasadam or favorite food stuff? Everyone raised their hand, pizza, except for one boy. He said, I like rice and dal. And so even our taste buds, that which we taste is governed our what would you say, attraction to, or our aversion to, is governed by the modes of nature. And so what to speak of different types of personality, different types of personalities, even foodstuffs or colors, as I was explaining before. So they may match up materially or they may not. But when we come to the point of understanding the nature of the spirit soul and ourselves as being part and parcel of Krishna, then we can have some unity. But it's very good, Arthur. Very, very, very good topic that you brought up. But it's our dependence on Krishna.
So I just one more thing, and I'm still going to ponder it. I really like the part you said. I think you said whether we're in liberation or non-liberation or conditional, we're still depending upon the Lord.
Mm.
Even though like there's frustration, that just brings so much comfort. So I keep forgetting that even the material energy is Krishna. That's his like the I guess whatever word I'm looking for. It's still his energy.
Yeah.
It's really everything is Krishna. And
Everything is
so
Krishna.
why is it that I get frustrated? Why is it that I get frustrated at certain times? But anyway, I just like that part, what you said.
Why do we become frustrated? Because we're a fish out of water trying to become happy.
Right.
As soon as we realize that we're a fish and we need to get back in the water, and the closer we get, the happier we are.
Hare Krishna, yes.
Because so it's 9. It's oops, my computer set for East Coast time. It's 8:32.
Oh,
A couple minutes past our quota, but it was a good discussion. Thank you, Arthur, for bringing that up, and all the others who reflected today.
Thank you, Maharaj.